right kind of education for them to be having imported students. So they are going to shut them down, but they're not going to treat them like the Tri-Valley University. They are letting them go. They're telling them, look, if you can find admission in another school, another college, you can continue your education, which is kind of very nice. At the same time, they're saying if your course is terminated and you haven't done anything so far,
it's time to
you go back. Time to go. You know, so it's going to be pretty hard on them. And they're not registered by the Department of Education. So in other words, there's no accreditation.
That's right. And, you know, that's happening in many other places, too, where these for-profit colleges are seeing a big surge in growth because a lot of people who are unemployed are trying to go back to school.
That's right.
To earn or to learn different skills so they can remarket themselves. But, you know, these for-profit colleges don't necessarily have a standard of performance that they adhere to. They can cost a lot of money, and you're not necessarily guaranteed any kind of an admission or a future track. So there's no regulation on these things, unfortunately.
And you know, 65% of them go belly up, having taken a loan from the federal government. You know, I did not know these people can find these loopholes, you know?
Well, unfortunately, you know, the students that come through these programs, they don't often know. You know, in India, how are you supposed to know that the University of Northern Virginia is any different from the University of Virginia?
That's right.
Right? They look the same maybe for the non-savvy person overseas trying to find themselves a school. Unless they do their homework, it might not be so easy to see a for-profit college versus an accredited higher education university.
That's true. I mean, it's a shame for the students that they did not do their due diligence. Of course, students have to do their due diligence as well. After all, they're going to a foreign country. They need to know a little bit about it, you know.
Yes. But even if you do go to an accredited school, that doesn't necessarily mean you won't get yourself into a bunch of hot water. This happened to a professor on Harvard's campus. Professor Subramanian Swamy teaches economics at the Harvard Summer School, and he's also the head of the Janata Party. Of course, he made the classic mistakes that a lot of politicians do. He opened his mouth and said the wrong thing. He said that Muslims in India must acknowledge with pride that though they may be Muslims, their ancestors were Hindus, and therefore only then they should be allowed to vote. Of course, this, you can imagine, caused furor over the campus, and of course, he may not even survive if the university decides to part ways with him. But when you're in these positions, you can be in the higher ed space, it doesn't matter. Your opinion counts. And if you're not careful with your words, you can be in trouble too.
Right here in the United States, I mean, he's a summer professor only.
And he's at Harvard.
Comes every summer, and he's been coming for many years. And I don't know how he got into it, because many people actually believe that. And he was just saying what I guess BJP believes, and he got himself into real big trouble.
Yes, he did.
Folks, universities all around the United States, you'll find that there are 57% of the students that are female, and 43% are male. I mean, that's a lot of difference.
And it's growing.
That's right. But that's not the case in business school. You know, in business school, it's a cutthroat competition, and that's where men excel. But this year, the class of 2013 at Wharton, which is the University of Pennsylvania, their business school, is really in the top 5.
It's often called the #1 school in the country.
I didn't want to say it, but yeah, it is in the top 5. And I must tell you that they used to have about 30% women, 70% men. But this year, this class of 2013 that came in is going to be 45% women.
Impressive.
You know, particularly in business school, when you go to, you have to really devote time to it. But women need to take care of their families as well. So what they do, they take a little breather, you know, and run the family, and once the children are going to school and all of that, they go back to the world of business. And you have heard Asta talk about that some women are gatherers, and they make better decisions, and they're better investment gurus than even men are. But this proves that that particular cycle is actually starting to go up. More women. You know, everywhere else, but talk about 30 years ago, it used to be split 50-50. but not in business school. Right now, it's heading to 50-50 in business school, which is really quite an achievement.
It is, and I also think the schools are paying attention. You know, women have become, instead of uncertain, unproven entities in business, they have become proven entities in business. And there are so many women CEOs now that embody the traits that you want in a leader. Indra Nooyi, of course, is the one that comes to mind. She heads PepsiCo. So it's not surprising to me that this statistic has emerged. It's actually a healthy trend. And I also think schools are probably paying twice the attention that they used to pay to those female applicants.
That's true.
So it's a two-way thing.
But, you know, the deputy director for admissions at Wharton said, we really didn't do anything special other than that when the women visited, we had other women to talk to them, not men. That was the one difference that I think nailed it.
I think they also realized that business school is expensive, and there's only so many people that can afford to go to a school like that and pay some of the exorbitant fees that are there. So if they have an applicant and the applicant is qualified and they're coming to you with the means to go, you know, why should a school not want to have a good quality product go through their doors?
Top reason is the applications were down by 9% this year.
Well, exactly, exactly. At the end of the day, all colleges need money too. Well, Ramesh, you know this. I'm in the media space. I'm always paying attention to what's happening in the print media because, as we've discussed many times on this show, newspapers are really struggling these days, especially because ad revenue seems to be drying up and going all towards the internet. But there's some glimmer of hope in places like India where newspapers are actually booming. Newspaper industry in India is booming. Could you imagine that?
That's always been the case.
Well, actually, you know, in India, newspapers have struggled to survive for many different reasons. Well, mainly because India has so many languages and dialects that you have to produce a newspaper for every single one. But these days, English as the medium, there's a lot more people who are educated. Right? So literacy in India, and the growing literacy rate in India is actually helping the newspaper industry. In addition, because we have a burgeoning middle class now in India, those middle class folks like to stay up on current topics. They want to know what's going on in the world, not just in their local towns and villages.
Because the web in India is expensive.
That's right. That's the third reason. So you got to my punchline before I did. The biggest reason probably is because the internet is not so prevalent in India, and therefore a lot of villages, rural communities still don't have the kind of free access that we're used to here.
That's very true.
And therefore they're not going to the internet to read their newspapers. They're still buying the print editions. But as a result of being behind the times in some way, you're actually still sustaining a form of industry that has been everywhere else in the world in decline. But in India, it's very, very healthy.